Hello, everybody. This is Dr. So, and today we're going to go over the information you need to study for your histology practical. By now, you've probably figured out or been told that, our body is made of chemicals, and chemicals help us make our cells. Many cells together make up tissues. Those tissues make up organs, and those organs make up organ systems. And then when we put all the organ systems together, we get the organism, which in this case would be a human. But what we're interested in studying today are the cells that make up the tissues. So I'm going to go through the terms on your study guide and tell you a little bit about each thing, and then you will use this video to be able to study for your histology practical. There are 4 different categories that we can put our body tissues into. One is epithelial tissue, 2 is connective tissue, 3 is muscle, and 4 is nerves or nervous tissue. So before we get into tissues, I just want to talk about 3 general features that all animal cells have. So all the cell types we're going to talk about have these 3 features. They all have a nucleus, they all have a cytoplasm, and they all have a cell membrane, which is sometimes called a plasma membrane. The cells I'm showing you here are from your mouth, where maybe you took a toothpick and they would scrape the inside of your mouth. You'd put it on a slide and stain it. And so that's what you're seeing here. But they do demonstrate the 3 general features of animal cells, which again are a nucleus, a cytoplasm, and a plasma membrane. Let's begin with epithelial tissue. In general, you find epithelial tissue covering the exposed surfaces of the body and lining the internal passageways and chambers found in the body. They're also involved in producing glandular secretions. Epithelial tissues can be classified according to their shape and the number of cell layers they have. The different shapes of epithelial tissue are flattened, cuboidal, and columns or rectangles. The flattened epithelial cells are called squamous. The cube-shaped epithelial cells are called cuboidal. And the rectangular-shaped epithelial cells are called columnar. And then you have to look at the number of cell layers that are there. So you can have either one cell layer where it would be simple. You could have multiple cell layers, kind of like bricks stacked up on top of each other. That would be stratified. And you can have pseudostratified, where the cells are not stacked up on each other all the way to the top. We can then put the shape and the number of cell layers together to get the name of our epithelial tissues. So let's go ahead and start looking through some of these tissues. The first type we have is simple squamous epithelium. And so if you look at these cells, you should see that they are flat, which tells you that they're squamous, and there's only one single layer, which tells you that they're simple. So simple squamous epithelium. Examples of where you would find these cells are in your kidney, your lung, or the lining of your mouth. And their basic job is for protection and diffusion. If we change the number of layers to many layers stacked on top of each other, you'll have stratified squamous epithelium. This is located in your skin. It functions in protection against abrasion and pathogens. If you change the shape of the cell to cube-shaped, you would have simple cuboidal epithelium, still one cell layer thick. Their function would be secretion and absorption, and you could find them in structures like the kidney or the thyroid gland. If we change that shape to rectangle, still one cell layer thick, we'll get simple columnar epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium has another cell type found in it called a goblet cell. A goblet cell is called a goblet cell because it looks like the shape of a wine glass at the top, the goblet, so they called it a goblet cell, and its main function is to secrete mucus. The overall function of simple columnar epithelium would be lubrication, protection, secretion, or absorption. And we would find simple columnar epithelium located in the digestive system, like in your intestines. That leads us to ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. And that's a mouthful to say, I realize it, but it's ciliated, which means it has those little microscopic projections at the top that kind of wave back and forth to move things along. It's pseudostratified, which means if you look at how the cells are stacked, they're stacked on top of one another, but not all the way to the top. You can't see the nuclei going all the way to the top of the tissue. They're located in the trachea, and their main function is secretion. Also, you can find goblet cells here just like you could in the simple columnar epithelium, and they have the same function, which is the secretion of mucus. That pretty much sums up epithelial tissue. Moving on to connective tissue, the function of connective tissue is to fill the internal space, give structure and support and bind together tissues and organs of the body, and store energy. Connective tissue consists of three main components: cells, protein fibers, and a ground substance. I want to pause for a second and talk about the practical now that we've talked about a couple tissues. And so if I put a slide up like this, and it would have a multiple choice question like this, you should be able to answer that. You're going to get asked basically one of 5 questions. Name the tissue, name the structure, name the function, name the location, or name the cell if there is a cell involved. Not all the tissues have a cell you need to know. So here's a couple practice ones, and I'll give you the answers at the end. Let's see if you can answer the questions or not. So I'm going to put up 3 questions with multiple choice answers, and you choose the ones you think is correct. And after the third one, hit pause if you're not ready to go forward. And then I'll give you the answers after the questions. Connective tissue makes up bone, tendons and ligaments, cartilage, adipose tissue, and blood. We're going to touch on most of these structures except for blood. Blood will be covered when you move on to Bio 204, but just know that it is a connective tissue. First type of connective tissue I want to talk about is loose or areolar connective tissue. You can call it loose connective tissue or areolar connective tissue. Both ways are acceptable. It's located under the epithelium, and its function is to wrap and cushion organs and hold fluids. So if we look at the structure of it, you have this gel-like matrix that has cells and fibers dispersed into it. There are elastic fibers, which are the thinner kind of hair-like fibers, and collagen fibers, which are the thicker pink fibers. There's also fibroblasts. Fibroblasts function to basically produce the major components of the extracellular matrix. Adipose tissue you might better know as fat. And the function of adipose tissue is to store energy, but also to protect and cushion our organs. And where you would find adipose tissue is pretty much anywhere in your body. It fills the space between organs, it lays under your skin between your skin and muscle. So I'm sure you guys can figure out a place to list at a location for adipose tissue. It's composed of adipocytes. Adipocytes, when it ends in CYTE, it means it's a cell. And so adipocytes make up adipose tissue. And if you look at the adipocytes, you can see that it's almost entirely a fat globule, that there's very little organelles. You can see the nucleus smushed off to the side. And when I look at adipose tissue, I think it looks like a chain link fence. Some people said it looks like bubbles on a glass. Anything that you can do to help you remember these tissues and their structures will really help you to learn these things. Dense connective tissue is found in your tendons and ligaments, and its function is then to attach muscle to bone or bone to bone. You can see collagen fibers and the nuclei of fibroblasts. And if you look at dense connective tissue, you can see that it's wavy. And that's one of the things that tells you that it's dense connective tissue, the fact that it is wavy. Collagen fibers are the pink structures, and the fibroblast nuclei are the little purple dots. Reticular tissue is located in lymphoid organs, and I know you don't know what those are yet, but lymphoid organs are the lymph nodes, the spleen, or bone marrow. And the function of reticular tissue is to support all the other cell types, particularly white blood cells and macrophages that are active in immunity. In reticular tissue, you'll also see these fibers, these dark fibers, and those are called reticular fibers. Still under connective tissue, we're going to move on to the different types of cartilage. There are 3 different types of cartilage: hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. Hyaline cartilage is found in the embryonic skeleton, at the ends of long bones, the ends of your ribs, the tip of your nose, your voice box called your larynx, and its function is protection, support, and to resist stress. If you take a look at this hyaline cartilage, you'll notice that it has this pinkish purplish background. That's called the matrix or the ground matrix. Within that are these small little holes that are called lacuna. You're going to hear that term many times throughout this. Lacuna means hole. And in the hole is the cell, and the cell is called a chondrocyte. So you have the chondrocyte that's in the lacuna. The lacuna are dispersed through the matrix, and the whole thing is hyaline cartilage. Elastic cartilage could sometimes be confused with hyaline cartilage, but elastic cartilage has these lines running through it. Those lines are the elastic fibers. The function of elastic cartilage is to provide strength and elasticity while maintaining shape. And the location of elastic tissue is at the outer part of your ear and your epiglottis. If you take a look at the elastic cartilage now, we can see again those elastic fibers I was talking about. We can see those holes again that are called lacuna that are dispersed throughout the matrix. And inside the holes, we have a cartilage cell, and that's called the chondrocyte. The last type of cartilage is called fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is tough cartilage and it's flexible. It has a lot of collagen fibers in it, which gives it that fibrous look. You can find it located in the pubic symphysis, so between your hip bones, the intervertebral discs, which would be between your vertebrae, and the meniscus of your knee. Again, you can see these fibers that are collagen fibers. You can see the kind of blue matrix in the background. You can see the lacuna with the chondrocytes. The last type of connective tissue I want to talk about is bone. Bone is very unique in its look. It kind of looks like a tree trunk when you cut it down and you see the tree rings. Many of you might know that you can count the tree rings to see how old the tree is, except that doesn't work in bone. The amount of rings doesn't mean how old you are. Bone functions to support your body. Without bone, you'd just be kind of a sack of skin. And bone also functions in protection, like your skull protects your bones and your ribs protect your organs. And most people get a little thrown for a loop when we ask the location of bone. And if you think about it, where do you think the location of bone is? Bones, right? Bone is located in bones. So when we look at the microscopic structure of bone, you can see the clear, it kind of looks white in this picture or light gray. That's the extracellular matrix that's hardened in order for the bone to act as a functional unit. The components of bone, the microscopic components, are the central or Haversian canal, the canaliculi, the osteocytes, lacuna, lamellae, and matrix. All of those together make up an osteon. So one osteon has a central canal called the Haversian canal or central canal, either one works. You look at the rings that are around the Haversian canal, those rings are called lamellae. If you see in those rings those little dark spots, those are called lacuna. Inside the lacuna would be the cells, which would be the osteocytes. Off of the osteocytes, you see little lines. Those are canaliculi. Most people are familiar with Harry Potter and the fact that Ron Weasley hates spiders. And so when I think of this structure, I think of it as being something that Ron Weasley would be very afraid of, which would be a merry-go-round that's filled with spiders. All right, so the center of the merry-go-round is the central canal or the Haversian canal. And then the spiders are arranged in rings that are called lamellae. The backs of the spiders are the lacuna, and then the spider's legs would be called canaliculi. And the whole thing, the whole merry-go-round would be called an osteon. I hope that makes sense. Those are the connective tissues and their structures, locations, and functions, which you need to know. Moving on to the different types of muscle tissue, there's 3 different types. 1 is skeletal muscle, 2 is smooth muscle, and the 3rd type is cardiac muscle. The function of your skeletal muscle is to move your skeleton or your bones. If you look at this picture of skeletal muscle, you can see the light and dark striations that are there, as well as the muscle fibers themselves. If you look at skeletal muscle, one of the things you can use to tell that it's skeletal muscle is that the nuclei are pushed off to the side and there's more than one of them. So it's multinucleated and the nuclei are kind of pushed off to the side. Also, if you look at the muscle fibers, they do not branch, they just keep going in one direction. Those are ways that you can tell you're looking at skeletal muscle rather than cardiac muscle, because cardiac muscle is also striated. But a couple things cardiac muscle has are the nuclei are pretty big and centrally located. If you look at the muscle fibers, they also branch, or it's called bifurcate, which means they either go like to the right or to the left. And they also have intercalated discs. The last type of the muscle is smooth muscle. Smooth muscle you find around internal organs of the digestive system, the reproductive system, respiratory system, and it functions in peristalsis. And you're probably wondering what peristalsis is. Peristalsis is when the smooth muscle involuntarily constricts and relaxes. That constriction and relaxation causes wave-like movements that pushes the contents in the lumen forward. So it's important in things like digestion and swallowing. I did mention that smooth muscle was involuntary, as is a cardiac muscle. Involuntary means you don't have to think about it in order for it to contract. It contracts on its own. Skeletal muscle is voluntary, and cardiac muscle and smooth muscle are involuntary. Which leads us to the last type of tissue, which is nerve tissue. When we talk about nerve tissue, you're talking about the nerves that are in your leg or the nerves that are in your brain. And if you look at the nerves that are in your brain, they look like this. This is a typical neuron, where you have a cell body with a nucleus and dendrites, which bring information to the cell body, and then axons, which take the information away from a cell body. The function of a neuron is to transmit signals either in the brain or between the brain and the body. But to transmit signals is the basic function of the neuron, and the location would be the brain. That pretty much sums up histology. Remember, there's 5 questions you can have. Name the tissue, name the cell, name the structure, give a function, or give a location for each of the tissues. All right, guys, until next time, have a great day.